Online again. Hello everyone. We are now back to speak about Ayurveda, yoga, and science. Recently, I have recorded a lecture on Western and Indian way of learning and about materialism and spiritualism. This was the last two videos in my channel in English. Now we are going to speak about science and is it and if Ayurveda and yoga should be considered science or should they only be considered sciences? Okay, so first we need to understand what this word science means. I have written in the description of the video about Wikipedia links to science and scientific method. So science means in Latin to get to know, and you can also understand that scientia is also to feel, to live it, to realize it, not only to know in the head, just as is the common understanding of knowing today. It was also in the sense of experiencing. So in the Wikipedia link, you can read about the description of science since before Socrates up to modern philosophy of science and Einstein and whatever. Here we are going to just put one simple point on the assumption of what is considered the scientific method that is from the 17th, 18th century after Christ, that you have to have one person or you have to have a kind of group of people, and they should be similar to the other group of people. And these two groups of people, one is not going to be tested. This is going to be the basis parameter for comparison to the other group of testing group. Okay, so the first idea that it's important in this scientific method is that group A and B are substantially similar in the way that is being tested. You can say, oh, this person in this group is a woman with blonde hair and this is with dark hair. If the color of the hair is not important, just like they are making some things about breast cancer. In this way, what is being tested doesn't matter what is the color of the hair for the Western science. And the point is that doesn't matter if the person is Kapha, Pitta, or Vata Prakriti. They are all just women from the certain kind of age range, and they can be tested as similar. Okay? So in this point, Ayurveda and also yoga understand that even people have the same kind of metabolism, you could say just like Kapha Prakriti or whatever, they're not on the same karmic trend. So the first assumption of science that we have uniformity between the groups that are being tested is not completely verified in or accepted in Ayurveda. In certain degrees, yes. In another kind of deeper analysis, no. Why a person receives the same treatment and one unique person gets cured and the other all doesn't? For the modern perspective of science, this is not a scientific result in the way that is reproducible. So to be science, you have to have one kind of testing, this scientific method we're speaking, that not only the people that are being tested, they are uniform, but the researcher, the scientist, is making some tests And the fact that it is the researcher A or the researcher B doesn't matter. This is also another important point that for more fine use of Ayurveda, it doesn't it does not stand by itself, because in Ayurveda the researcher would be the Vaidya, the badly translated doctor, and the Shakti, the personal yogic presence, power, prana of the doctor, is important in how the mantras are going to be chanted and how the medicine is going to be incorporated with fine, subtle aspects of healing. So in Ayurveda and yoga, we are all a part of a consciousness, a bigger consciousness, and the universe is not dead. The universe is not mechanical in the way that Western scientific method tries to understand medicine. Here I'm not going to the point to see if physics or chemistry should be considered in the same manner of the scientific method, even though for Vedic culture, if you take a stone and you chant a lot of mantras into this stone, until the time that this stone has that vibration present there, this is not going to be a regular stone, just like the lingams that are spread all over India. But we are not going to this kind of mineral level. We are going to stay on the aspect of Ayurveda and yoga that are dealing mainly, but not only, with humans. So the first part is that in Ayurveda, person A and person B, it can be brothers, it can be twins, doesn't matter. The twin A and the twin B are not going to be considered 100% uniform in a way of the scientific testing, because the posture of the person willing to be healed or not is going to play a very important role in how the experiment is going to take. So in Western science, the world view is that the universe works like a clock, and it is impersonal, and it has rules, laws that are not able to be even a little bit changed. In yoga, if you practice a lot of internalization of prana, of awareness, you can start to be, better say like this, a little bit of God, in the sense that it can change the rules of the game, just like Jesus did, or any kind of special, let us say, beings that appear in the history. In India, Jesus would be just like, okay, there are many like him. There are people that are developing the inner power of awareness. So the first point of the scientific method is that things should be with uniformity between what is being tested and what is being compared. This doesn't stand in a more finer view of Ayurveda and yoga. The second point is that the researcher, the scientist, is not going to be disconsidered in terms of his presence. So if the researcher, yogi A, is willing to heal the person, and the researcher, yogi B, is not willing, the difference of flow of prana is going to make a huge importance in the experiment. Just like nowadays there are this kind of experiment where the person gets near to the rice and puts a word like love, and the rice doesn't ruin, and in the other it's just like hate, and it starts to be with a lot of black things there in a way that it's just like putrefying. So the point is that the first aspect of scientific method, that the basis of comparison is uniform, accepted by Ayurveda and yoga in a more specific way, but in a general perspective, you can say that the pharmaceutical industry is to say, oh, Shatavari goes to this this rigorous scientific testing. This means it has parameter A and parameter B, they are uniform, they are being tested at the same time, in the same place, under the same situations, with persons, with researchers that are not just like being able to change the result of the experiment just by its presence or its willingness or whatever. But prana, in a more subtle level, is like the Schrödinger cat, that just the presence of the researcher, the scientist, it kinds of implies one state or another of the material existence, because the quantum aspect of being, that is being and not being at the same time, is not possible when there is an observer there. So in our quantum physics, it's already known that the presence of the observer changes the result of the experiment, even if you can say that in more gross stula experiments, this is not so much. The point is that for very sukshma, very subtle experiences, even the presence of it doesn't even need to be a human, is going to make a huge impact, just like in the Schrödinger cats experiment theory hypothesis. I don't know what is the correct word for that, but the point is that nowadays the scientific physicist community of the West already accept the idea, okay, the observer is going to make a difference in these cases, where the parameter of what is being tested is very minute, it's very subatomic level. And for more gross experiments, just like you take the pool and you just like play the pool, and you say, oh, if I'm willing that the ball goes to the hole, this is not going to make any difference. Okay, if you have not a trained mind, it's not going to make any difference. But if you are developing yogic powers, siddha powers, this can make difference, but this is not very much accepted in our culture. So the point is that in our Western way of thinking, the superpowers happen by accident, and there is the Spider-Man, and there is the Wolverine, there is all these kinds of people that get different powers, or Batman, that are technological, and they are done from outside to inside. In the East, the superpowers are developed from inside to outside, from prana, from chi, from whatever, like these people that practice a lot of qigong, and they stand with their magnetic force activated, connecting to the ground. There are a lot of people pushing him, but the person doesn't move, not because he's with a lot of muscle power, there is resistance, but mainly because they have the ability, the faculty to activate different powers of nature that need to practice, and they need to be just like Shaolin practice. They need to be internally developed, not externally developed. So nowadays there is a lot of publications and people saying, oh, Ayurveda is scientific, Ayurveda is rational medicine, Ayurveda is not a thing that we chant mantras and this kind of stuff. Okay, this is one possible way to look to Ayurveda, to yoga, but the point is that this is destroying bigger part of Ayurveda, that is going into the minute levels, in the subtle layers of existence, where the simple presence will make difference in the results. To go to karmic trends like we go in Jyotish, it's very important to understand that we are just part of a bigger consciousness, And this bigger consciousness, you can say divine, you can say God, you can say whatever, they are actually moving the world with subtle commands. We are not aware of them because we are very locked up in our senses, in our indriyas, and we are looking outwards. But for people that are practicing this kind of self-observation through Ayurveda, through yoga, whatever, we are starting to understand that there are more, just like we believe in the West, there is this God, gravity, that plays one function, and this function has its rules, and it has its place. For example, in the moon, the God gravity doesn't work in the same way that it works in the Earth, because there is a relation between this God gravity with mass. So in the West, we understand that there are some natural forces that work in the world, but they are mainly materialistic. They don't go beyond the level that we can measure with our instruments, our outer instruments, because we have also an inner instrument with the ability to go into nanoscale and even further with our mind. So if you read about the texts in Ayurveda that describe how to prepare medicines with heavy metals, you can say, how did they discover them? They didn't have microscopes or whatever. So the ability to have this microscopic view or nanoscopic view, it's already inbuilt in human consciousness, and also large scale parameters, how the universe was created and all this stuff. But our science in the West, as we spoke before previously in the other video, it's more Rahunic aspect of science that is related to technologies and instruments that are outside our body. The Eastern science also develops the Ketunian way of science that is related to introspection and self-awareness. Here, I'm not saying that the Western science is completely wrong and the Eastern science is completely right. I'm only saying that if we put Ayurveda and yoga just as sciences in the way that it's usually taught in the schools, like the scientific method and the rationalism and empiricism, going through the senses, this is very, very small aspect of what Ayurveda and yoga are showing to humanity. It doesn't matter if it's through yoga, it's through Vedic Hindu culture, or what else. The point is that there are some secrets, there are some minute aspects of life that our technology is not able to go into today. We can go to nanotechnology or a little bit further, subatomic level, but there are still more levels of construction of energy. We don't have a clue about the dark energy or the dark matter, and they all play an important role in our clear, in our bright matter that we can measure and we can see. And nowadays, with modern physics, it's more easy to speak to Western mind that not everything that exists we can see directly. Sometimes we need to see it indirectly in the yogic perspective. This means that we see it from the eyes of consciousness, not the eyes of the senses. This means that we still can use our senses, but the senses are always going to be subjective to contamination with our memories, because it's very hard to actually see what is being in front of us without our memory corrupting the data. But when we go inwards and the realization is from the soul level, that it's a thing that doesn't exist anymore in the Western paradigm. In the soul level, there is the observation without this sensation that I am observing, because the I concept is dissolving. So you can enter in these states of awareness, in these states of observation, this samadhi process. So to talk to World Health Organization, to talk with how to Western governments, how and where and with whom and why to bring yoga and Ayurveda to the West. It can be very important to have scientific experiments in the way that science is taught for us in the West. But in the East, there are two different ranges, two different aspects of science. The science that you can develop externally on the material world, and it's always going to be a kind of illusion, because what it's measurable, it's going to be changing the rules someday, somehow. And also you can develop the science that it's from within, from internal observation, not from your cells itself, but it can be also, but mainly from the aspect that is not the you, the ahankara concept, the ego process that is observing, is just like pure observation, as Plato would say, the logos. Just to sum up, in the East, the idea of perfect observation, in the West we could say the reaching point of the Platonic logos, it's still possible, and it's still a valid way of doing science. But in the West, we already lost the idea of the perfect science, the divine science, the non-I science. You can say, how you are going to do the science if it's not you? Yeah, it's a concept that you start to understand when you meditate, when you do kind of practice, that at the same time, there is the awareness of being, and there is the awareness of watching and feeling, but there is the sensation that it's not a different thing from yourself. It's just one single thing. And this is the state of yoga. This is the state of samadhi. This is the state of perfect divine realization. So with this, we can say that Ayurveda and yoga in the West can be studied through the scientific method that is still operating and regulating what people say as science. But it's a misnomer to say that Ayurveda and yoga should be scientific on this definition, on these grounds. Okay? Thanks for watching. I see you on the next Namaste Speaks, and I hope you enjoy it. If you want to like it, share it, comment, and also contact me for any kind of Ayurvedic counseling. There are some links below. You can direct them. Okay? See you soon. Namaste.